Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program. My name is Nadine Heidinger, and I'm the Director of Communications at the National Arts Club. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, we host over 150 free programs, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. To find out more about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org, or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, a conversation about contemporary art at the Louvre with a virtual journey through the museum's galleries. Martin Kiefer, the Louvre's exhibition manager, will highlight the permanent contemporary artworks in the Louvre, focusing on the most recent commission by renowned Venezuelan artist Elias Crespin, who will describe this exciting challenge, and the beautiful result at the heart of the museum. This program is part of a three-part series presented in partnership with American Friends of the Louvre. Thank you to everyone involved for making this event possible. Following the conversation will be a brief Q&A, so please feel free to use the Q&A function for any questions you might have. And without further ado, please let me turn it over to Martin and Elias. Please enjoy the conversation.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Dear friends of the Louvre and of contemporary art, I am glad to meet you on Zoom for this conference with the artist Elias Crespin. His recent work, Untitled du Midi, will be the focus of our talk today. I prepared a little PowerPoint that you will see here. Yes, I am happy to take you on a virtual journey of contemporary art in the Louvre Museum. What you see here is the court of Napoleon, with the pyramid of I.M.Pei, the architect that died recently. And this is the official entrance for all the visitors to enter the museum. My short talk will be an introduction of the beginning of contemporary art in the palace. I will also show you some examples of permanent contemporary decor all over the palace. And you will have a short overview of some contemporary art exhibitions. And finally, we focus on our guest, the Venezuelan and Paris-based artist, Elias Crespin. So on this drawing, you have the Louvre, how it looks today. There are 8 centuries of constructions, and this is the very important part not to forget. The Louvre was never built to be a museum. The Louvre was built to be a king's palace. And for 8 centuries, it was hosted by the kings. So it was only turned into a museum at the very end of the 19th century and then opened to public by the 20th century. So it is important to understand that it grew initially from the Middle Age at the end of the 12th century until to its size that we know nowadays in the 19th century. In fact, here between the 2 pavilions, you had the castle of Catherine de' Medici. But in the 19th century, it burned down during a riot called La Commune, which is on 1871. So which means the Louvre Museum was in fact bigger at the time of the palace in the 19th century than it is nowadays, because we don't have anymore here on the left side the Tuileries Castle. But we extended the domain of the National Museum of the Louvre with the Garden of the Tuileries, which will continue on the left part. And we also have attached to our domain the Musée Delacroix, which is a little museum of the artist Eugène Delacroix on the left bank on Paris. All this together makes of the museum of the Louvre the biggest museum on earth. François Mitterrand, he was the one who decided to transform the museum in 1989, into the biggest museum on earth, because the northern wing that you have here, the so-called Richelieu, used to be the Ministry of Finance. They had to get out because we transformed from exactly here, I hope you can see my arrow, all over the different wings until the southern part here, you have on 3 levels the collection of the Louvre exhibited. On this part here, you have the University École du Louvre, and on the northern wing, which is left, you have the Art Decorative Museum, also a national museum. So the main construction for this was the pyramid, because this was then the official entrance. And it's important to mention that the pyramid is a symbol, a very strong symbol, because it's an architecture as a sculpture. You can compare, like, for example, the Guggenheim in Bilbao. It's really the idea to make out of the architecture already an art piece by its own. So that's when I start my contemporary art tour in the museum, I always start with this architecture as an art piece. The museum itself has 8 departments, and there are painting, sculpture, drawing, decorative art, Islamic art, Oriental antiques, Egyptian antiques, and Greek, Roman, and Etruscan antiques. I say this because they are all over this huge building, and we will find contemporary art all over the different wings. There are more than 35,000 art pieces shown to public, which means if you want to see each art piece for 10 seconds, you would need 4 days and 3 nights in a row. The general visit, by the way, is about 3 hours per visitor, which we hope will come back very soon. So let's go now to the entrance and we go inside, and I will start with a 19th century art piece in the beautiful gallery of Apollon that you have here in the southern wing called Denon. It's one of my favorite galleries, in fact. It's an all Baroque, richly ornamented, all golden gallery, which made the link of 2 parts of the castle. It was built 15 years before Versailles. We are on the time of Louis XIV when he was a child, before he moved to Versailles as a teenager. And you have paintings on the ceiling, like here on the bottom that you can see, by Charles Lebrun. Charles Lebrun used to be the official painter of the King Louis XIV. But we have here, in fact, a contemporary art piece, which was not really the very first one, but we have in the middle here, Eugène Delacroix, with a big painting, a canvas glued on the ceiling called Apollon, because the whole gallery is devoted to Apollon. So this was done in 1849, and you have a very romantic decor on the ceiling in a very Baroque surrounding. And when you come next to the museum and you will see the jewels in this gallery, which are very famous for it, then don't forget to lift up your head and stare at this beautiful romantic painting. It's a canvas, I told you, which is a painting, but Delacroix was also very keen on fresco, which means you can paint it directly on stone, how he did, for example, for the famous frescoes in the church Saint-Sulpice in Paris on left bank. So from the Romantic, we now continue to modern art, which is not far away from the Apollon Gallery. We have here the gallery for Henry II, where we have a beautiful painting of Georges Braque. In fact, when you're in this gallery beyond, you look at the ceiling, and I ask people, what do you think, who made this work? The usual answer is Henri Matisse or Pablo Picasso, but in fact, it is a typical series of Georges Braque. It's called Les Oiseaux, the birds. It was painted in 1953, and it was a commission of the director of the Louvre at that time, Georges Salle. We have here a very nice example of modern art in a Renaissance ceiling, which was done itself by Siebeck de Capri, an Italian sculptor, in 1557. It's Henry II, because what you can't see on the picture, it's all over written on the ceiling. Each king would add his initials or his name on the construction he did during his reign in the Palace of the Louvre. That's why you find all over the museum letters like N for Napoleon I or III, or L for Louis, H for Henry, F for Francis I, and so on. From this beautiful example of old and new, of all golden and all blue, we will continue to a contemporary commission, the first one done in 2007 by Anselm Kiefer. It's also on the eastern wing, on the northeast, far away from the entrance. You have to go there through different departments to achieve the staircase, by the Napoleon 19th century architecture called Bercier and Fontaine. We'll speak about them later again because Elias Crespin also knows things about them to tell you. You have here this beautiful 10-meter high painting, and Anselm Kiefer also added to this initial commission 2 statues. On the left, you have here Danae, and on the right, you have the Hortus Conclusus kind of garden. He's a very keen sculptor as well, not only known as a painter. And in the middle, this very impressive 10-meter high painting, which is called Athanor. So what means Athanor? Athanor is the oven of the alchemist, in which plum turns into gold. So you have on this first level here, a naked man lying on the ground, on his back, the arms along the body, like in the position of yoga called Shavasana. Behind and over him, a dark sky with stars. There are vertical lines going all up that links the body with the sky and the earth to the universe. You have horizontal lines, and on the ground level, which is brown, which refers to the earth, which is filled with plum. You have in the middle this horizontal line, which is silver. And on the top, you have another line, which is gold. So you have the 3 steps of the transformation of the alchemist from plum into gold. There are also 3 inscriptions on the side, nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, the 3 colors of alchemy: black for plum, white for silver, and red for gold. The naked man himself on the bottom is a self-portrait of the artist Anselm Kiefer. Followed by this first contemporary commission, we have still here the 2 sculptures. We come to the next commissions we did in 2010 to the French artist Franco Morley, who made a beautiful art piece in the staircase called Le Fuel. It's an architect of the 19th century who made the link of 3 different departments that we have nowadays. We are in the middle where you have the art craft. Downstairs, you have the sculptures, and upstairs, you have the painting part. The title of this work is Escalier. It's Esprit d'Escalier. It's a French expression, and in English, you would translate this as a staircase wit or as an escalator wit. It's a term used of thinking of the perfect retort too late. So this gap of Esprit d'Escalier, the gap of escalator wit, is very much visible in his work because you can see that his work is overlapping and slippering in the old windows, and you have the new art pieces of the artist himself over it. So you have just 1 level here. It also is upstairs and downstairs. It's a beautiful art piece that enlightens the whole beautiful staircase of Escalier Le Fuel. At this moment, I can perhaps add, why do we do contemporary art? Because as you can see, it should always serve the palace. It should serve the museum. It should serve the collection. We would never give an entrance or invitation to an artist, do whatever you want. We try to focus on artistic commissions that respond to our collection or that respond to our palace. And I think we have here a very nice, discreet, but a strong work of a proposition done by Franco Morley, which really has its nice effect. We come to an American artist that has also a commission done in 2010 by Psy Twombly in, again, the eastern part of the wing in the Sully part, in one of the biggest galleries we have. Once again, remember, it's a king's palace, it's not a museum, so all the galleries that were built are of smaller size. There are just a few galleries that are bigger, and so that's why we had, in the meanwhile, covered the courts to present bigger sculptures, for example, that need much more space. So Psy Twombly made this huge painting in 2010. It's his last work before he died. It's the biggest art piece of the Louvre, if you consider it as a painting, because the biggest hanging painting is the Wedding of Cana that you know in front of the Mona Lisa by Paolo Veronese. This is the biggest art piece, but it is like the Georges Braque and like the Delacroix, glued on the ceiling by 12 different canvases. So when you are an aficionados of Psy Twombly like I am, and you expect to see this very abstract work and the fragile writing, then you might be surprised. This gallery is just beside the Georges Braque gallery that we have seen with the birds. So it is very much responding to this. And once you enter this big gallery where the ceiling of Psy Twombly is, then you are very much impressed by this deep blue. And this is what he wanted. There was no way to change his mind. He wanted to make a different work for the apotheosis of his career. He knew already he was old and sick at that time, that probably it might be his last creation he did. So he was referring with his blue sky, which is very beautiful. In fact, when you arrive, it's surprising. You don't expect, you don't see a typical Psy Twombly art piece, but it is very much harmony and beautiful in this context of this big gallery. The blue refers to his Mediterranean attachment. He lived very much between Lexington in Virginia, where he grew up, and also in Italy, in Gaeta, which is this town on the border of the sea between Rome and Naples. And that's the color that he's so much referring to the Mediterranean part, as he is understood himself to be a Mediterranean artist. In these white blankets, he added different names in Cyrillic writings of Greek sculptures like Praxiteles or Phidias or others. Now I will take you a little bit outside of the museum. What you see here is the garden of the Tuileries that belongs since the beginning of the 3rd millennium to the Museum of the Louvre. In this garden, we have a lot of contemporary art pieces. This one here is by the Italian arte povera artist called Giuseppe Benoni. The title of the art piece is L'arbre à voyelles, which means the tree of vowels. You have, in fact, on the roots here, different letters that is hardly possible to be seen on that picture here. And what is nice, it's not a real tree. It was once a real tree. He made a mold out of it, and it's bronze filled of metal, which is a very contemporary reconstruction of that broken tree in this very natural surrounding, an art piece that really dialogues perfectly well with the surrounding of the Jardin des Tuileries. We also host in that part the FIAC each year, the International Art Fair of Paris, and there we have also a program of big size art pieces presented during 1 month. Then we have one of our exhibition places for contemporary art, not permanent ones, but for exhibitions for 3 months to 1 year, which is mostly used in the pyramid. Under the pyramid, we have the last we had was this Japanese artist called Kohei Nawa. Kohei Nawa made this art piece in 2018 for the Japan season in France. There was an exchange of France in Japan and from France and from Japan of both countries, sorry. It's a 10-meter high statue completely covered of gold leaf. The modern interpretation of a golden throne reflects several links with the museum. First, the throne itself, it's a very modern interpretation of it, reminds the residence of the kings, which were from more than 8 centuries in the Louvre. The throne also refers to the collection of the decorative art department. And then we have the gold leaf itself, which was a mere wish of Jean-Luc Martinez, the director himself, wanting to have the whole statue covered by gold leaf, because this refers to our internal workshops we have, a long tradition of people working on restoration on our frames and art pieces with gold leaf technique. It's the biggest work we have ever shown under the pyramid. And with the golden leaf, it was all shiny, illuminating effect during the night and day. A beautiful art piece to be seen by far from outside and also from inside in a 360 degrees modeling. Then I come to the court outside of the Cour Carré, where we also host sometimes exhibitions of contemporary artists. Here you have an example of, in 2016, of the French artist Eva Jospen. Eva Jospen is working with craft paper. This is the pavilion she constructed on the fountain, and you had to enter the pavilion to see the 360 degrees workpiece, on craft paper. It's a grotto and a forest, and she sculpted it out of this craft paper, tiny and completely detailed, precisely beautiful, that you could walk inside in a circle to see the whole of it. It was also responding to a season we had about garden and the different exhibitions at that time. The same year, we invited JR, a very famous French artist, originally street artist, and he made this very crazy art piece that you can see right now, which is not a Photoshop. This is a real picture taken of an anamorphosis, which means when you have a specific point of view and you look at the pyramid, it will disappear. So he made a project to disappear the pyramid by covering the whole facade of the pyramid with posters. And what you see, in fact, on the top here is the real pyramid, and what is depassing are the real chimneys of the facade that you have behind. And everything which is gray is covered by paper. So if you go out of this ideal point of view, you will see that it's not on good scale anymore. That's why we call this an anamorphosis. A very big success at a point that we re-invited him when we celebrated the 30 years of the pyramid by pay. This was in 2019. In 2019, this time from the other point of view, behind the pyramid, JR made appear. After disappearing, he made appear the pyramid, and like on an archaeological site, as if the pyramid was always, since centuries, existing under earth. This is a one-week ephemeral work of paper glued on the ground with volunteers. They were mounting all this during 1 week, and when it was open to public, it was an ephemeral work for 1 day. So this is the perfect shot just before the opening to the public. I come now back again to the Louvre inside with an art piece that was also commissioned by the French artist called Jean-Michel O'daniel, and which is situated on the northern wing called Richelieu in one of the two courts that used to be open to the sky, and that we covered with the big construction by François Mitterrand to exhibition spaces for the sculpture. There are two courts, Marly and Puget. This is the poster on the right where we made the invitation to Jean-Michel O'daniel. It initially started, in fact, as an editing of a book about plants, flowers, all over the collection of the 8 departments. And you could make a kind of hunt of finding these pictures on the book in the real galleries of the different departments. It was such a beautiful project that he made bigger examples of the creation he did about the rose. On the right side here of the poster, you can see the rose on the stair. This is an extract of the cycle of Rubens, of the Medici cycle. It's the flower he has chosen to be the official flower of the Louvre. And out of this flower, he made this proposition that you can see on gold leaf behind. So there are 6 examples, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. And according to light, it is completely shiny because of the gold leaf. And we come to the last piece I will speak about before we hand it to Elias Crespin. It's a tiny work that you can hardly see. In fact, it is hidden here. I don't know if you can see my arrow. Yes. On the ground, you have this very small medallion. Here it's again in this corridor. And yes, that's how it looks once you have found it by chance. It's from the Dutch artist Jan Diebetz. It's a commission by the state of France and by the town of Paris in 1994. There was a contest, and he was applying with this project of art piece because it had to be an homage to Arago, who was a scientist of that time working on the meridian. And when Paris was occupied in the Second World War by the Germans. They melted the statue of Aragon and turned them into munition. So for decades, the pedestal was existing without any art piece anymore. So they made this contest to complete it. And he was saying, I will do at once the smallest art piece and the biggest art piece existing in Paris, because there are 134 medaillons going through Paris, from the north of Paris to the south of Paris along the meridian. And the meridian goes through the Louvre. So on the domain of the Louvre, we have 5 medaillons like this, 2 inside the palace and 3 outside. And the idea is not to put the name and the explication. It's you walk on it by chance, you can see it. And yes, it's a discovery of a tiny thing which takes part of a very big art piece, of a land art that the Dutch artist Jan Diebetz takes part. So this now takes us to the second part of our talk, to Elias Crespin, that will present his work with his own words. His work, as you can see, is here on the Sully wing, all on the southeastern part. And this is the official poster that we had for the opening, which is still, the picture is very recent. I took it like last week, the official poster, because we are already close to public since a very long time, and we are still waiting for the opening, of course. But I was happy to see that Elias Crespin's poster is still under the pyramid. Thank you very much for your listening. Elias, I hand it to you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for this wonderful explanation and description of the contemporary art that is in the museum. I am thrilled to have been invited to this project. I want to first thank the American Friends of the Louvre and the National Arts Club for inviting me to talk about what I do and what this wonderful project in the Louvre has been about. I will start by showing a little bit what it is that I do as an artist. I'm focused mainly in movement, in a very particular way of showing movement, which is a synchronized moving combination or modulation of individual elements that create a unity as an organism, as a living being, or as a society working all together in harmony. So here you can see one of my works. It's a soliton, dancing gently and suspended on space. So. Another work that I would like to show you of mine is this Gran Exxonette. This Gran Exxonette was conceived and presented specifically for this building in Paris, the Grand Palais, during the exhibition Artists and Robots, exhibition curated by Jérôme Notre and Laurence Bertrand d'Orléac, where I shared the exhibition space with other wonderful artists like Miguel Chevalier or Moura, and it counted the history of computing art, or art in computers, and was focused on computer imagination, whatever that can be. It was a very interesting exhibition, and I did my best to present this piece in a very difficult place, the tower of a staircase. It had only one possibility, one hanging point, so it was a challenge. But I'm focusing on this piece because it was the piece that the president of the museum Louvre, Jean-Luc Martinez, saw of mine for the first time, and he immediately connected it with the tradition of the museum of integrating contemporary artists at the moment into the architecture as decors. And he said, wow, this work is here in the Grand Palais. why can't I have one work in the Louvre? So he called me, he invited me for a meeting, and he proposed me to conceive a work for the Louvre, a permanent work for the most important museum or biggest museum in the world, as Martin just explained us. I was invited to create a work that would be always there. I had to process that. I passed a couple of days with anesthesia. And then I was invited to, first I was taken to see the different contemporary artworks that are in the museum and visit parts of the museum. They gave me their ideas where something could go. And then they let me free to walk around the museum and try to find and propose a good place. So I did a lot of walking around. Here I show you what would the way be from the entrance, the pyramid, to the final place where I proposed that I preferred for. We passed the dungeon under the main pavilion. We arrived to the Sphinx and stairs up to the antiques of Egypt, all the way up the stairway. And that's the place that I found, the Escalier du Midi. That was my preferred place.
Tell me, Elias, was it difficult for you to make the choice of your place for the permanent work because there were several options for you?
Yeah, well, the museum, as you showed us, is such a big place. So first was to walk it all around and understand it. It was not easy. And then I had a couple of criteria, like, for example, I didn't want to invade an already taken space for an exhibition or for an art context. So I didn't want to, put something in the middle of a lot of already presented artwork. So it wasn't easy. But this stairway was available, seemed available and beautiful, not just because it was available.
And also, if I may allow to add, you have this kinetic art piece, which means it's moving art, and you're focusing on the palace. And as you said, not on the collection. And it's nice to have art pieces that only respond to the palace, because the palace itself is really already an art piece.
Yes, and it has so much history in terms of all the architects and artists that had previously participated in making this museum what it is. The building on one side and the museum on the other. They have histories of art on one side, of architecture and art on the other. And all together, I was invited to add a link to that chain of events in art history. So it was really an honor. It wasn't easy. And then I found this place. Also walking around the museum, just looking at it from a spatial or volumetric point of view, architectural point of view, it's great. Also thinking with a goal of one of my sculptures living there. It was an incredible period of visiting the museum with that perspective, and not any museum, the Louvre Museum. Incredible. So I wasn't sure. I crossed my fingers. I hope this place is accepted. And my ideas, which I started to sketch here, you can see some of the first sketches, first completely by hand, and then integrating some more measured computer drawings with some hand notes. And finally, I did some 3D modeling of the whole volume of the stair and the ceiling, the vault ceiling, the beautiful vault ceiling above it, to present and to show in a concrete way what my thoughts about it was. On the left-hand side and the bottom here, you see one crazy idea of what a work for the pyramid could be, but that couldn't be permanent. So I stayed focused on the Escalier du Midi, this stairway, and went on. from there, I prepared some computer simulations of what it could be. So those were my contemporary sketches that I prepared. Red, I tried different shapes, colors, triangles, squares, just bars. It had to be, there are technical limitations on what I can do with the technique that I've developed for my works. But within those limitations, I had several options. And it would, you know, at this point, it was just a computer simulation. So it's relatively easy to make something like this now. Is that going to be installable, and is it going to work actually? That was still something to try. So I had a very good feedback of these simulations, and they asked me, okay, let's see what's it going to be more concrete. Do you have some examples of the elements? Do you have some? Can you bring them so we can see how they look at the in the place? So I had the idea not just to bring the elements that I would suspend there, but why not let's actually make a working piece and have everything dancing there and get a feeling. Again, I had a very good feedback. Here you see the first prototype that I did, and I presented in place. In the left, you see some of the dancing of it. On the right, with the Martin himself, Aline François and Dominique de Fonréau, on the conversation and having a look of what this young, or not so young, but this Venezuelan Paris artist is thinking of. So I had a very good feedback again. And also at that point, I got the idea of the name for the sculpture. I had the idea of onde. Onde is wave in French. So wave, a friend of mine was suggested, the digital wave or the computer wave. And I didn't like that too techie term, but that very day, presenting the prototype to the director of the museum and all the directors of departments that were invited to the meeting, I got this idea that it could be the wave of Midi, because it was on the Escalier du Midi. So I told them, well, the Onde du Midi, which would be the name in French. And everybody was very positively surprised by the name. And I was the most surprised that me, with my not so good French speaking, was able to get an interesting and appealing name for these French intellectuals that are in the museum. So it was a very rewarding moment to get a positive feedback of the prototype and how the actual work would be, and the naming, the title of the sculpture. So after that, I made a smaller prototype with the colors that I preferred, which are black and blue, and I'll talk a little more about that later. So here you see different scenes of that color, final color selection process. And well, at this point, everybody was very excited about the project. Museum who requested something, I was excited, but we were missing one more thing. That little one more thing was the financing. As you can imagine, this is a complex project, and it required a lot of people involved, a lot of technical resources, and that had a relative cost. Fortunately, the patronage service of the Louvre was fast to propose and found an art foundation, which is Art Explora, who was interested from the beginning. And I want to take the moment to really and profoundly thank them for the support they gave me to be able to materialize this project, and also for all the effort. If you check Art Explorer, you'll see all the effort they do to support the arts and the art related activities. It's really incredible. It would be great to see much more foundations follow their example. Thank you very much, Art Explorer. So thanks to the ability of being able to produce the piece, we started the work. Here you see some images of the tests at the studio on the upper left of the screen. On the lower left, the frame that supports the elements and has all the electronics inside. On some of the working at the site for placing the frame. And on the right-hand side, you can see the artist doing some checks on the hanging points. Well, after months of preparation and then 15 days of installation, we had the piece up and running, and I was able to do the final composition that ended up being a 1 hour long dance choreography that loops onto itself. Here you see several images, but more specifically, I would like to show you a 3-minute excerpt of a documentary that the Louvre produced through the director Nathalie David, that shows a bit more the dynamic of the work and some of my ideas around it.
Une influence artistique très grande de vivre quotidiennement avec ma grand-mère, l'artiste Guigo. J'ai appris avec elle à plier les fils de fer. Elle m'a fait aussi un peu des classes de peinture, de couleurs. C'était ça ma formation artistique, on va dire. Je n'ai pas fait l'école de beaux-arts.
That's the building installation process, as you imagine. That's the work, final work.
Je me sers de la mathématique d'une façon similaire à laquelle la musique se sert de la notation musicale. Et là, elle se compose de différentes structures mathématiquement connues, comme une montagne, c'est une exponentielle, ou une parabole, c'est comme un U, ou ça peut être inversé. Avec ce langage, je peux définir cette composition visuelle. C'est comme une musique qu'on entend avec les yeux. Pour choisir la couleur, on est venu sur place avec un prototype et on a mis 5 couleurs différentes. Avec les rouges, ou la couleur naturelle du métal, aluminium, ça manquait un peu de présence de l'or. Et donc, finalement, c'était ou bien bleu ou bien noir. On a choisi les deux. Je trouve que si on fait une combinaison de différentes textures dans une œuvre qui conforme une unité, on présente une unité basée sur des différences. Et je trouve que c'est une métaphore d'harmonie qu'on devrait avoir dans nos sociétés. Un aspecto que me interesa mucho y que está presente en mi obra es la relación entre elementos que están aparentemente relacionados, unidos, pero que en realidad no están unidos. En un momento dado, cuando un elemento se separa de esa unidad, se crea una tensión que produce un estado de ánimo diferente. He dado cuenta es que permite al visitante olvidarse de todo y se concentra muy fuertemente en ese fenómeno visual dinámico que tiene frente a los ojos.
Well, that's it. I couldn't finish without, of course, showing a bit of what the inauguration was during January, the month of January, the 24th of January. So here we had a great gathering of people coming from all around the world and celebrating the Onde du Midi. Thank you very much. Now we can pass to a short Q&A period. So you can ask the questions which you might have.
Thank you so much. I mean, for sharing your truly stunning work. And of course, there are a lot of questions, and my apologies in advance. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we will try our best. The first question, just because, well, it's fresh in our mind, is there from Claudia. Is there a sound element to the sculpture? It was hard to tell in the video.
No, there is not. But at least not artistically. Sometimes there's a little sound of the strings against some moving part of the sculpture, but it's very slight. You almost don't perceive it. It's not part of the sculpture, so there's no sound.
Okay. Another question. I assume your work requires a lot of planning in terms of engineering and placement of the piece. Did you choose the place that was the easiest to install your piece, or the place that may have been harder but more fitting in your opinion?
The later. Yeah, it was, I don't know if it was the harder, but it was a hard place. We're talking about what they call here a classified monument, which is the whole building. So there are lots of restrictions on how you can attach something or support something to the building. You don't have engineering information on many of the construction materials that were used at the time, etc. So it was complicated, but it was the best place aesthetically or architecturally, volumetrically that I found. So I wished it could be there, and it was possible. We could make it there. Good question. Thank you.
And I think I can add to this question the one of Patricia Littlefield that asks if the point of view is always from below or if there are another from the level of the work. But it's interesting to add to this question is no, you can only see it from the ground level you have seen in the pictures, but you can see the work from outside. When you're outside of the palace, you are walking along the Seine, the river, you can see, in fact, the installation from far away because it has these big windows, and it's very beautiful if you walk outside and you have the illuminated art piece, especially in the evening, that you can see dancing, moving, of course, without any sound, but it's beautiful to have these different point of views and an invitation from outside to come into this museum.
Gorgeous. A few questions from KJ. Are any more partnerships planned with JR, who I believe that was the artist's name, who does the illusions to the outside? Absolutely stunning as well. First question. The second question is for Elias. Where else has your art been featured? Is there anywhere in the US that one could see your work?
For the first part with JR, so I don't know if you can still see me put the buttons, but anyway, JR, we made two major projects with him, but what I did not mention is we also have we did a project with him, which is called calcography, which is a printing of old technique, and he made prints for the Louvre, which are not signed, but that you can buy on low prices. It's a democratic way of culture to spread over public because it's a way of getting art pieces in collaboration with the Louvre that artist did on big number of prints. And he made this Anamorphosis of the hidden pyramid. He made examples out of that. But we don't have any more programs with JR. He came twice, which is very nice to have him twice, but he's a very active artist, and you can see a lot of his projects, installations, films and videos and pictures all over the world. And for the second part of the question,
well,
Elias.
Yes, I have worked actually, and there's a semi-permanent exhibition in the new building of the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. It's the Kinder Museum, the Kinder building of the museum. It's an incredible building, new, just inaugurated, and there's a incredible exhibition on I don't know exactly how to describe it, but the section I'm featured in is dedicated to the line. And at the entrance of one of the rooms, there's my piece dancing. You can see it there. And also it happens to be that in that room dedicated to the line, the artist that most works are exhibited happens to be my grandmother, Gego. So it's an incredible relationship of works there, not only in aesthetics and visually, but also it's well, generationally, I don't know how to say. And then you can see works of mine in the US in my galleries. And actually there's in New York, Cecilia Toro's gallery. And actually I have an exhibition going on in Houston in the Sicardi Gallery. So if you happen to be able to go to Houston or are in Houston, you're very welcome to come and visit the exhibition.
Great.
I can compliment also in the Maison de l'Amérique Latine here in Paris, there's a permanent installation of mine.
Great. One more for Elias. What would your legacy for the future generations visiting the Louvre and how do you stand regarding the other contemporary artists in the museum?
Well, the movement that my work has, in a way, gives it the illusion that it's a living organism. Mm-hmm. So it's a living sculpture within a living museum, and the museum is alive thanks to its growth and inclusion of new artists into their collection.
Great, and we have time for a few more. For both of you, perhaps, do you think contemporary art at the Louvre helps growing the diversity of visitors?
Definitely. That's the very nice part, because we are a universal museum. We have mainly a collection from the antiques until 1848. That's a date which was chosen of our collection to finish, and then it goes to the Musée d'Orsay, not the National Museum, with mainly our Impressionist painters, and after this to the Centre Pompidou, the National Museum of Modern Art. So we are more a universal museum with a collection that is not representing contemporary art, but we do contemporary art punctually or permanent, like for the decor. And this is a very nice way to make a museum living and to bring a new crowd, not only the typical museum crowd. It brings above all also a Parisian crowd, because we usually have mainly a tourist crowd coming to see the museum, but we are very keen on trying to appeal also the locals and the region of Paris to come. And of course, it brings also a contemporary art keen public. And that's nice to be in this system of station of going from Pompidou to the Louvre to the Palais de Tokyo. And you can perhaps one day also find ancient art in contemporary museums. The exchange would be nice.
Agreed. A few questions about if the installation will still be there when people might be able to visit. So this year, next year,
Definitely.
when can we go see it?
It is permanent, so it won't disappear, that's for sure. Elias will complete for the technical part how long it can live, of course it is maintenance. And for the opening, of course, I can't tell you, but as soon as the museum will open, and I hope it will be before the summer break, we will put on the button work and the piece will run again on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Great.
So yeah, it's a challenge to have such a working mechanical sculpture being a permanent sculpture. So one of a permanent installation, one of the ways that I worked hard on was documentation and conservation, technical conservation procedures and spare parts. So we know of other artists that have done this in the past, like Pei in Korea, Namjoon Peg, and many of the parts for his installations are not found anymore. So I've had that question over and over again. So ahead, in a proactive way, we've provided, I think, for the next 100 years of possible replacement parts. Everything is double or triple in the stock, and we provided a most complete as we could procedures for conservation of the different parts. So we expect it to run longer than the parts required, and it's ready to confront whatever the challenges are to have it running.
That is great. I, for one, am very much looking forward to seeing it when I'm in Paris next, which will hopefully be soon. And on that note, I wanted to thank again both you, Elias, and Martin for this fascinating presentation on contemporary art at the Louvre. Again, thank you to the American Friends of the Louvre and the Louvre itself. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. It certainly lifts your spirit to see art, and especially contemporary art, always one of my favorites. So thank you so much. And we hope to see everyone soon and let the art live.
Let's make a second inauguration at the Escalier du Midi.
Exactly.
It's possible.
I'm all for it. Thank you so much, everyone. Please stay well.
Well,
Take
there's
care.
one person that was, do we have to cut already?
No, if you have some, no, go ahead.
There's a person who asked, how are they suspended? Well, here you see a mini version, and I just made it swing. Every element is suspended on 2 strings. I don't know if you see how it's swinging there, right? So it's swinging like a swing through being hung on 2 strings. So that's the way the sculpture in the Louvre is suspended. It has 256 strings holding 128 colored tubes. There's also a question here from Walter Guns. Is there a conscious intent in the creation of the dances or of your works, or is it purely on the moment random designs? It's an intuitive, purely for the moment design. There's no intention behind a shape, like if it's the ocean or a mountain. I'm just focused like in a trance during the composition on the shape and what's happening on the relative position of the elements.
Great. So our next event will be a studio tour with you.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
All right.
Organize
I know everybody would love to do that as well. So, but for today, again, thank you so much. And please stay well. We'll see you soon, I hope.
All right.
Merci
Thank you.
beaucoup. Gracias.
Thank
Thank
you
you. Bye.
so much. Dankeschön.